Daniel Park was a fat, disgusting loner who was tortured by all of his classmates for being the ugliest pig in school, until one day he woke up with a perfect body and had gotten the hottest face and rock-hard abs. Before he knew it, he had become the hottest guy in school and used his BTS-like charm to blow every girl's plot armor off. However, before Daniel became that handsome idol, he spent his days as the slave of his ruthless bully, Tae-sung. On a random day, Daniel groveled on the bathroom floor while Tae-sung and his crew were getting turned up from smoking cheap cancer sticks. They hated him because he was short and overweight, so they called him a pig and commanded him to dance around like a circus animal. However, no matter what Daniel did, he could never satisfy the bullies, and they always ended up punching his face into a pulp. Back at home, Daniel took his anger out on his mom, telling her that she was the reason he became so fat and miserable. He tried asking her if he could transfer to another school, but she told him that they couldn't afford it, and that he would lose touch with all of his classmates. But after years of being treated like garbage, he slammed his fists into the kitchen wall and ran off into his room. The next day at school, Daniel stood in fear as Tae-sung and his friends placed bets on who would hit him the hardest. One of the guys, a professional soccer player, shot the ball right in Daniel's face, and it knocked him straight to the ground. Tae-sung was furious with Daniel for letting him win, so he punched him deep in the gut, knocking the air out of his lungs, and picked him up to hit him a second time. But Daniel's mom arrived and tried forcing him to let go. As she lashed out at Tae-sung for hurting her son, Daniel felt embarrassed by the whole scene, so he screamed at her, telling her to get lost. When he got back home, Daniel felt bad for his outburst at school, and he apologized to his mom when he returned home. After finally understanding the extent of how badly he was bullied, she forgave him and promised that she would transfer him to another school. However, his mother said that she couldn't tag along with him because of her new job, but she swore to do her best as a mother to support him. Those words made Daniel cry, and he made an inner promise to do better and provide for his mom in the future. He arrived at the location of his new apartment, and he was excited for the opportunity to start a new journey. Daniel went into the city in search of something to eat, and while he couldn't help but marvel at the various sights along the way, he accidentally bumped into a hot girl on the street, Jin. Her boyfriend, Jin Seong, came along, and they were about to leave when Daniel flashed his awkward smile. Her boyfriend was convinced that Daniel was a lonely loser who was after his girl, so he challenged him to a street fight. And Daniel was determined to stand up for himself in this new city, so he clenched his fists and got ready to fight. But before he could make a move, Jin Seong landed a hard blow on his face, throwing him to the ground. As Daniel tried to get up and run, Jin Seong grabbed his hair and punched him harder a second time. While people stopped and took pictures of how badly he was getting beaten, he kept on going, even after Jin begged him, until Daniel became unconscious and wiped out from all the beating. With no more dignity left, Daniel returned to his apartment and cried his eyes out after seeing the post of his beatdown on the internet. He wondered why he was born with such bad luck and began to doubt whether his life would ever get better, even in the new city. In the middle of the night, Daniel woke up and immediately felt like he was standing on a higher ground. After stumbling into the bathroom, he looked at himself in the mirror, but was shocked at the reflection that he got in return. Somehow, in the course of his sleep, his spirit was transferred into the body of a tall and handsome demigod. However, his original body was still sleeping on the bedroom floor, and when he tried confirming if it was alive, he immediately switched back. He initially thought it was all a dream, but was surprised to see that the demigod's body was lying right next to him. Once he got back into the other body, he wondered if he should call the cops for help. However, when he remembered all the torture he went through as a short and ugly fatso, he quickly had a change of mind and decided to use this new body to make up for his awful past. The following morning, Daniel arrived at his new school, and everyone was blown away by his good looks. As he walked into the class and introduced himself, all the girls had their floodgates open. He took a seat at the back of the class and was shocked to discover that the girl from yesterday and her homicidal boyfriend were among his new classmates. Ha-nul came over to his seat and tried seducing him with her giant cannons, and among one of the girls who thought he was hot was Jin. But the teacher yelled at Ha-nul to sit back down. She followed Daniel to the cafeteria, and Daniel revealed that he chose the fashion major because of the low grades he got at his former school. However, when Han-nul asked his reason for choosing the major, he lied and said that he enjoyed doing fashion. Back in class, Daniel found it hard to concentrate because of the stress from the previous day, and he fell asleep halfway through the lecture. Suddenly, he switched back into his fatso body and immediately freaked out because of the fear of being discovered. He tried forcing himself back to sleep, but he was too refreshed from the long slumber to return to that state. Luckily, Han-nul came over and scared him into waking up, saying that the class was over. He thanked her for saving him, and heaved a sigh of relief for escaping his nightmare body. Later that night, Daniel tried using his demigod charm to get a part-time job as a cashier at a local convenience store. His plan was to get the job for his fatso persona to work throughout the night, while his perfect body got the beauty sleep needed to remain handsome each morning. The manager was immediately convinced to employ Daniel, because he imagined how much money he would make from having such a handsome employee. However, his hopes were crushed when Daniel informed him that he was getting the job for a friend instead. After a few minutes, Daniel's fatso persona appeared. Seeing his fat, disgusting body, the manager was reluctant to employ him at first, but Daniel impressed him with his vast knowledge of cancer flavors, so he ended up securing the job instantly. For the first time in his life, he was finally going to be earning a living, and he was put in charge of the store for the night shifts. Just 5 fucking minutes later, Jin Seong and his crew walked in, trying to purchase a few bottles of piss. Jin Seong was about to let things slide with the fatso, but when he discovered that his name was the same as Mr. Steel Yo-Girl, he quickly lost his temper and punched him in the face, jumping behind the register stand and beating him until he was bloody. His friends took embarrassing pictures of Daniel's plot to prevent him from reporting them to the police, and they took off from the store. The next day at school, Daniel stood and watched as Jin Seong and his crew laughed at the naked pictures they took of his fatso persona. All of them praised Jin Seong for beating him up, and began saying that his mother was probably as disgusting as him. Unable to bear the indirect insults to him or his mom any longer, Daniel interrupted their conversation and told them not to use the fatso's mom in their jokes anymore. Jin Seong wasn't ready to take orders from the new kid, so he rose up and challenged him to a fight. He threw the first punch, but he was immediately held back by another classmate, Jae Yol, who was against fighting. However, Jin Seong broke out from his grip and threw another punch at Daniel's direction. This time though, Daniel tapped into his demigod abilities and dodged the second punch, along with all the others that Jin Seong threw at him. Daniel kept on dodging until Jin Seong pushed him against the lockers and launched a deadly blow towards his face. However, rather than dodging this time, Daniel stood his ground and blocked the punch, shocking everyone in class. He tried going in for another blow, but in that instant, Daniel remembered all the times that he had been bullied, and he channeled all his energy into one huge punch, bashing Jin Seong in the gut and forcing him to surrender. The crowd of students went wild with excitement, and they all hailed him for winning the fight. The news of his knockout punch got to the leaders of other departments, and they became agitated and determined to take him down. Later that night, a strange boy named Jin-ho quietly walked into the store and picked up a pack of licorice sticks. Daniel knew something was off, but when he invited him to the counter to pay, the boy rushed out of the building. As Daniel ran after him, he realized the potential consequences he would face if his boss found out about the incident. But when he finally reached the alley, he saw Jin Seong's friends. It was at that moment he knew he fucked up, and that Jin-ho was just another victim of bullying. He begged them to pay for the pack of cigarettes, but they all laughed at him, and Hyun-do grabbed him by the shoulder, threatening to post more embarrassing pictures of him on the internet if he continued to ask for payment. As they tried making him fight with Jin-ho, a man called Basco interrupted their bullshit, grabbing Hyun-do by his neck and lifting him above the ground. He questioned the reason for his actions, shouting at the top of his voice, so Hyun-do begged him to let them go. They promised not to trouble the boys ever again, and after they left, Basco advised Daniel and Jin-ho to start working out in order to build their combat strength. The next day, Basco had stopped by the school cafeteria to see the new student everyone had been talking about. He found Daniel in the midst of the school's top bullies and decided to teach him a lesson, so he held Daniel by his shoulder and forcefully made him sit on a chair. However, to everyone's surprise, Daniel grabbed his hand and released Basco's grip from his shoulder. Basco was about to throw a punch at Daniel, but BMJ intervened and stopped him, apologizing to Daniel as he escorted Basco away. When his friends were angry with BME's intervention, he pointed at the redness on Basco's wrist, saying that Basco would have been the one to get knocked out. The 3 bullies from last night hurried over to Daniel and showered him with praise, begging him to be their friend. This was the first time in his life that he ever felt like someone wanted to be his friend, and Ha-neul asked him to join them for a fun night of drinking grape juice, so Daniel decided to give it a try. That evening, Daniel joined Hyun-do and his company at their regular drinking spot, but when Jin-seong arrived, he was uncomfortable seeing him around them and decided to drink heavily. Ha-neul noticed Daniel was wearing an oversized shirt and asked him why, but Daniel was determined to keep his secrets hidden, so he lied that it belonged to his roommate. After a few minutes, Hyun-do began making fun of the victims he had bullied and attempted showing Ha-neul some of their pictures on his phone. But Daniel grabbed it and crushed it with his hands, warning them to never bully other people. Having drank too much grape juice, he collapsed onto the table and realized he had accidentally woken up in his disgusting body, so he immediately ran to the grape juice party, lying to everyone that he was just bringing Daniel home for an errand. The following day, Daniel returned home from school and was surprised to find his mom waiting for him. Since she didn't know who he was, he introduced himself as Daniel's friend. But she wanted to know more about him and suggested they go out to eat. After arriving at a fine restaurant, she noticed Daniel's presence was drawing everyone's attention and wished her fatso son was here with them. After they talked about how their lives were going, she called the waiter over, asking if she could take the trash boxes with her. Seeing her collect all those boxes, Daniel realized that his mom has been collecting garbage just so that she could afford sending him to schooling. As she prepared to leave, she offered to give him some money for himself, but he didn't accept, saying he had enough with him. However, she continued insisting until he eventually took it.